Hi guys, welcome back to the Seaborn, a statistical data visualization section. We are going to talk about one of the most important aspects in the data presentation and report writing, which is figure aesthetics. This very important aspect is widely ignored by early stage data scientists, which could significantly reduce the impact of all your efforts at the end. Always pay attention to the figure aesthetics. In the previous lectures, we have seen a couple of times how to control figure aesthetics in Seaborn. But in this lecture, we will formally go through the figure aesthetics. So let's move on to the Jupyter notebook and figure, new notebook. So once again, we need to import Seaborn, matplotlib, and set the matplotlib inline. So import Seaborn as SNS, import matplotlib.pyplot as plt and matplotlib inline. So let's run this cell. So let's load the data again. Tips equal to sns dot load. I hope now you know how to use this load dataset function in Seaborn to load the built-in datasets. Pass in the name of the dataset, and let's check the head of tips here. It's always good to check the data. So here we have our dataset. The first thing we are going to talk about is set_style function. So we can set particular style using this set_style function. To call this function, we have to use sns dot set_style, and if we press shift tab, the default value is none, and we can pass in dark grid, dark, white, and ticks. Let's use default at the moment. Add few cells, and let's plot a simple count plot. SNS count plot, and pass in x equal to, say we want sex, and our data is tips, and run this cell. So this is the default style for Seaborn plots. Let's set style, sns dot set style, and pass in, we want, say, white. So now what we are going to do, we are going to set the style as white, and for the same plot. If we run this code, so now we have a plain background which is white in the back. Let's pass in ticks and run this again. Now we have ticks on the plot. Let's set the dark grid and run this thing. So once again, we have the dark grid here. So we can pass in white grid, and here we have white grid. So we can play with these styles. So usually it's very common to pass in white. So it looks quite nice actually. Moving forward, we can remove axis spines as well. And SNS provides a very simple way to remove spines, which is simply a dspine function. Let's copy this one, paste it here, and say sns dot dspine. If we press shift tab, top is true, right is true, left is false, and bottom is false. With this dspine, we are only getting left and bottom spine because they are false. Let's run this cell here. So here we have bottom and left spine only. Shift tab and copy these ones, and we can pass in false here. So now we are setting all false. So we are getting all spines in our plot. So here we have, if we pass in left true, bottom true, and let's set all true. And now we don't have any spine to our plot. Let's talk about figure size and aspect. We can simply use matplotlib's plt.figure and pass in figure size with width and height to change the size of most of the Seaborn plots. If you remember, plt.figure, and if we shift tab, we have fig size. If we copy this one, we used to pass in a tuple here with some figure size. Say we want to pass in 12 and 3. And now let's copy this code here, paste it here. What we are doing, we are using matplotlib's capability to change the figure size here. So figure size, we are passing 12, 3, which is width and height. Let's run this cell. So we have a different size of our figure. So we have changed the size of our figure with simply matplotlib's capability of changing the figure size. So another example to change the size and aspect ratio of your figure is that we have seen in our previous lecture using lmplot. Let's recall that one, sns dot lmplot and x equal to total bill, y equal to tip, and our data equal to tips, and let's set the size equal to say 5 and aspect equal to 2. If we run this cell, here we have changed the aspect and size for the figure. If you remember, we used this size and aspect parameter in our previous lecture. So in the previous lecture, we passed in aspect 0.7 and size 0.9, and we played with changing the numbers here, like we passed in different number to see how the aspect ratio and size changes. So let's move on to scaling the plot elements. Seaborn has a great capability using set_context function, which allow us to override default parameters. So let's check sns dot set context function. So if we press shift tab here, we see we have context none and font scale is equal to 1, which is default, and RC is none. If we move down, we see that we can change this context to paper, notebook, talk, or poster. We can pass in the font scale, which is a float and optional. If we move down, we see that we can set the context to paper, we can set the context to talk, and pass in the font scale whatever we want. We can use RC parameter, pass in the dictionary, and in this case for line width, and so much more. Let's set this to paper and say we want font scale, say 3, and once again sns dot count plot, pass in x equal to sex, our data is tips, and let's run this cell. So using this set context, we have changed the figure according to our requirement. We can pass in the font scale, say let's pass in 5 and see how the things change. So here we have much bigger text around the plot. If we pass in 1, this is quite small, so we can play with this thing like 2 and whatever our requirement is. This is quite reasonable to present in the paper. So great job, guys. If you want to learn more about controlling the figure aesthetic, check Seaborn's official documentation about figure aesthetics. This is very important when you are presenting your data because the presentation and the data should clearly convey the message what you want to tell. Everything should be well presented and clearly seen by the audience. So always pay attention to figure aesthetics. You will see the great impact of your presentation when you put some time on figure aesthetics. So this was all about Seaborn at the moment. We have learned a range of functions and the capabilities of Seaborn for data visualization. Let's move on to the exercises section. See you in the next lecture. Good luck.